Howdy, Redesert Boy here. Well, today I just want to talk about my first really hunting rifle, other than my 22 Henry that I bought. My second rifle I bought was um, a caliber that, as I was growing up, even though I grew up in Arizona and Nevada and went back there from time to time, I did spend a fair amount of time living in California growing up there. And one of the things that always fascinated me was I'd go over and I'd visit. There was this one family that I'd go over and visit their house. And one of the sons there was a family of this doctor, and they would go on hunting trips like to Montana. Excuse me. And I thought it was fascinating because, he and his dad were very avid hunters, and the mom and the family was like a very much environmental type person and all that for all these causes. But it was kind of an interesting contrast. But when I go over there, one of the things they did when they would go up to hunt, they go like up to Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, but especially Montana. They always made sure that they took a 45-70 with them, and it was usually one with an octagon barrel. And I always thought that was kind of it was a very powerful rifle. I knew that, and it was my understanding it would be good for about anything you'd run into. So I kind of always had an affinity for this 45-70 caliber. Of course, all of you know it goes back to the Old West, back in the days of the Calvary. And, it was very, very popular for all kinds of hunting, but was capable of dealing not only with buffalo and so forth, but from black bears and grizzly bears and stuff. So, I always thought if I'm going to buy a gun, in case I ever move somewhere like Idaho, because I did have relatives up there, I thought maybe someday I'll move up there. And never knew I'd end up in Montana, which it probably has more grizzly bears than Idaho. I know it does. And of course, moose and things too. But I had bought this as my second rifle, my main hunting rifle, kind of do everything rifle, and that is my Henry. This is an H010 model. Now this is an earlier one. A lot of you are going to go, there's no side gate. Yeah, because back in those days, Henry was not making side gates. They had 2 feet only. And, we'll show that the gun is empty. And one thing about the 45-70 is that, yes, it has a cartridge that's very much going to stop, if you have the appropriate ammunition and you have an appropriate 45-70 that can handle modern ammunition, and it's a modern rifle, and it will handle about anything that it will face. Now, I just recently enjoyed a video by the Pierce brothers, especially by Brian Pierce, all about the history of Marlin 45-70s, specifically the development of the 45-70 and evolution. If you've never checked out their channel, I'd really encourage you to. If you're really looking for history and personal anecdotes, it's well worth the time to listen to the videos. But anyway, that was one of my anecdotes for that. And so when I went out to buy one, I got this. Now, one thing I will say about Henry, when I first got this rifle, I did have a couple of specific ammunition it didn't want to chamber. And that's why having a good gun store a lot of times is kind of important. I went back there and they took the gun and they sent it back to Henry, and Henry sent it back, and there wasn't a charge one for it. And ever since that day, I've never had any issues with it. Now, one of the things, being kind of new to getting back into shooting, specifically long guns, I was out at the range there, and I was trying to sight in this. This has, semi-buckhorn type sights with a bead. That's the style sights this has. And right now I have a pick rail on there, which I think you might find interesting on a 45-70. But anyway, I can still, with the way this happens to sit, for me, I can still feel like I can use that, for my own use for the iron sights. But you have to make your own decisions about those kind of things. But anyway, I went to sight it in, and I was at the range and I had a bunch of different kinds of ammo. I had some Ultra Max, I think 405 grain Cowboy Action, all the way up to these nice Garrett cartridges of Texas in the 420 grain. In this case, the 4570 Springfield, which these cartridges are specifically made. What they say on their ammunition is these are safe for any, for any factory chambered firearm in good condition, and it includes some of the trapdoors and replicas. And because it's really important in 4570 as to, what's the age of the gun, what kind of gun it is, because I know there's those, I think there's rolling blocks and all that. And they need ammunition that's much lower pressure. This one here, which is the 4570 Government, this is safe only in modern firearms, according to Garrett's indication there, and something like this would be appropriate for that. This gun here happens to be more of a carbine. It's a 16.5-inch barrel, and if you wonder what that 4570 barrel looks like, it looks pretty large there. It's about 7 pounds, about 35.5 inches overall, 16.5-inch barrel, and it's 4 rounds. And one thing is, even though you don't have a loading gate, you can put a shell in here from the side if you had to throw another one in there. But if you're in a situation where you've expended all 4 shells, 4570, you're probably in pretty desperate straits. I don't know if having 1 or 2 more shells is going to make that much difference. It might, but you might be down to your sidearm by then, if you're in that extreme situation. So we'll talk about these more in a minute, but I just wanted to really talk about how, if you're really looking for kind of a historical cartridge and you want to enjoy it, this gun is not for everybody. This gun has some pretty sufficient recoil, but, coming back to my story about going to the range, I was out there trying to sight it in, and I must have shot about 30 or 40 rounds of 4570. Now, if you've ever done that, that's quite a few rounds of 4570, and I wasn't even done yet. Fortunately, there was a fellow enthusiast out there, saw my plight, and he came over and he was like, "Can I help you sight that in? Can I help spot for you?" And within about another 10 rounds, we kind of got the sights dialed in. I think that day I ended up shooting like 70 rounds of 4570. Now, I do not recommend this for anybody, and it was a variety. I went another time to the range later on when I was over in Nevada, after I lived in Nevada, and went to the range one day and shot about another 50 to 70 rounds. And you can end up with a kind of a bruised shoulder that way. It depends on the rounds. You get the Cowboy Action ones, they can be a real pleasure to shoot, and I plan to take this to the range here soon if I can get there before we have any more snow, and shoot some lighter loads, probably something like those Springfield ones, just a few of them, and some of those Government ones. Now, I also have some what they call Hammerhead, which are plus P ones, and they are not as much of a pleasure to shoot as you start getting up into that. There's also things like Remington Core Lokt at 600, at 400, I think they're 405 grain, which are kind of a jacketed soft point, good hunting round. If you shoot the Hornady 325 grain FTX, you will know it. Now, those things are pushing, 2,000 plus feet a second out. Probably in the smaller gun, maybe only about 1,800, 1,850, but it's a significant recoil. You will know it. These guys here are rated, at about 1,350 feet per second. This one here about 1,650. But you're pushing a 420 grain cartridge out at that speed. That's a big mass. And if you ever looked at a 4570 bullet, this is the really interesting part about it. It is massive. Look at that. That nice meplat like there, that's that bone-crushing meplat that you get these for. Now, do they have great range? No, they're about 100 to 125. Maybe 150, I don't know. Depends on the round, depends on the shooter, kind of gun. But I just wanted to share about this because I really like this. I got this nice strap from Henry, and it's just, the actions on these are so smooth, and I just really enjoy them. Shoots very nicely, and I would encourage you to explore lever actions. Maybe not a 45-70, maybe you want to get a 30-30, maybe you want to get a pistol caliber, you know, maybe you want to start with a 22 like my Henry, like this Henry Golden Boy here. This is where I started at, was with I really wasn't into lever actions, but then you see that's unloaded. Get a nice Henry Golden Boy like this, and you know, get started. They make them in different sizes. Henry makes dozens, almost like dozens of 22s. And other manufacturers make a lot of different guns too, but they really are into the special 22s. So that's my talk about the 45-70. Not for everybody, but can be a very effective round for all kinds of hunting. Many people, I'm sure, have taken their first deer with that, and I will take it to the range here eventually. So, as Reed Desert Boy always says, be safe out there, whatever you're doing. And if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye now.